afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum with me, your host, Imperial Dane, Master Propaganda, and additional thoughts. Today's topic is one that was a bit requested here. That's talking about how could they do heavy tanks in Communist 3. I mean, heavy tanks are going to be, heavy subject in both Communist 1 and Communist 2. It's only one of those trickier bits in part because a lot of people, like them, and of course, a lot of people don't like them, specifically the ones who have to play on the opposite end against them. In that regard, heavy tanks are this sort of, interesting construct in gaming, but certainly one that can sort of be a bit tricky to get right, because in one part they need to feel heavy, they need to feel like they have an impact. In that regard, feeling heavy is something I think where Communist 1 actually did better than Communist 2, whereas in Communist 1, they really felt like heavy tanks. Communist 2, there's a bit of lack there, possibly a bit some visual and sound effects, but to an extent I feel like Tiger 1 in Communist 1, even the King Tiger, certainly had more of an impact, sort of just visually and audio-wise than it does in Communist 2. It just sort of feels a bit lighter. But there's also just there's a gameplay impact. In that regard, the Tigers in Communist 1, I think, just also made a bit more of a splash. In part because they're a bit harder to kill overall, and that's only one thing you need to be careful about. That's just underevaluating or undervaluing the heavy tanks, but just priding or making too many easy counters to them. I mean, heavy tanks are supposed to be heavy tanks. Are supposed to be a reward, big push unit, and if you make them too easily countered, but just everything to shoot through the front line, they sort of get heavily devaluated. And that's why I think the issue a bit with heavy tanks in Communist 2, they just kept, buffing up most of the tank destroyers, specifically the Allied tank destroyers, to the point where those heavy tanks don't particularly feel heavy. And, the only sort of heavy tank that's sort of reasonably good for up the entire German army now is the Tiger tank, which is somehow due to its sheer mythical and legendary status, they can't touch, but they probably like to. So I think there are some, partly again, you also just future balance issues, and there's certainly some thoughts they're going to have there. So, I mean, the trick is, how do you do sort of a heavy tank properly? I mean, part of it is just, I think they need to add sidearm. Again, heavy tanks should just, partly identified again, they have weaker sidearm, weaker rear armor, and although technically the Tiger tank had, not so weak heavy side armor, it still could, do something. They would open up for more flanking, more, maneuvering against them, which again is sort of how you're supposed to defeat them, using numbers, maneuver, and all that, rather than just, lining up everything and just shooting at it from the front. I mean, they partly also supposed to be breakthrough tanks. Of course, they shouldn't just be able to break for anything either. I mean, half a dozen and tank guns should be able to do it, but I think there's certainly some things that need to be done to try and make heavy tanks feel more impactful in a sense, but not necessarily just also just murder everything. I mean, a part of me is just, again, really want a morale system, because, heavy tanks tend to be sort of, great morale boosters for, chaps who's on their side, but also, great demoralizers for the ones on the opposite side. I mean, Russian tankers would apparently, rather find other places to be if there was a King Tiger reported in the sector, I mean, if you're sitting in a Sherman, there's a King Tiger or a Tiger tank on the other receiving end, you're not going to be too keen on it, especially just in your own. So in that regard, one way to sort of try and slightly also balance it better would be just, have the tanks, sort of more morale affect other things. That we could also maybe just excuse some other things. But just having the tanks would be more just, morale flagships or battleships in that sense could, possibly also have some other sort of slight changes within balancing. You could also then add demoralizing effects. So if the Tiger tank gets blown up right in front of the German troops, they're going to be a bit, I think we need to go, Jürgen. Yeah, I think so too, Helmut. That way also opening up some options for more counter-play, where again, you're just putting it with the Tiger, it's blown up, and then you sort of have to pull yourself in the defense because you just suffered a huge morale blow. But I also think there just needs to be some exceptions, again, that not all heavy tanks are made equally. A Churchill tank, for example, is not on an equal basis as a Tiger tank, and the Americans were quite good at building tanks, and certainly not heavy tanks. I mean, that also needs to be an acceptance, though, again, American players have always been a bit difficult accepting that one. I mean, they're also, of course, depending on the franchise, because when you say, take Italy, I mean, there weren't a lot of heavy tanks. That most have been, the Tiger tank, the Tiger 1, not the Tiger 2, your Churchill tanks, and maybe some American heavy armored up Shermans, and that'd be about it. So, I mean, in that regard, they'd have to sort of try and figure out balance and decide how to do that. Maybe the Americans could be the only factor they could build multiple heavy tanks, but again, they'd be sort of discount heavy tanks compared to the Churchill tank, with sort of one that could just supremely soak up the most damage, whereas the Tiger tank just has the supreme punch, with decent range and sort of, decent heavy armor. So, I mean, that could also be a way of doing it. But again, a part of me just thinks, a great way of doing it, part would just be, morale. I mean, also just help, sort of, factor in other elements there. So just maybe allowing some further, neat things as well. And possibly also help with a bit where occasionally just see, the Allies run at the Tiger tank with all the infantry out in the open and just not giving a rat's ass about it, because they can just run at it, which is always something I feel is a bit silly. So, I mean, trying to, just, add some more weaknesses to them, but I also think just other ways of displaying their strength and dominance rather than just, raw strength would also, do, some good there. Could also make them feel, again, more impactful because, again, you kind of need to have the heavy tanks feel impactful. Otherwise, why even adding them in the first place? But again, they can't just one-shot everything either. So the trick is, how do we sort of hit that balance? And again, the trick could be, just not always having to fully focus on just damage, mitigating and all that, but also just focus on other sectors, which, honestly, again, morale could be a really good way of doing it. As an example, I'd still think that they need to sort of limit heavy tanks simply because, you just get people who just spam heavy tanks. I mean, that happened in Companies 1 where you were able to get more than one heavy tank. Similarly in Companies 2. I think they just need to accept that heavy tanks in this, like, again, say the Sherman Heavy Jumbo there, you can only get one at a time. Just one. No more. Just one. Uno. Eins. Particularly the Tiger tanks. So that also, I think, needs to be some acceptances and concessions made to that little realm. Otherwise, again, people are just going to keep spamming them once they can sort of get them, and that's not going to be particularly fun either. But again, look into morale, look into other areas, and again, accept, not all heavy tanks are made equally, because there's always going to be people who just anticipate that all's just been symmetrical. It's not. It wasn't in the war, and if again you want to play a World War II game, you're going to have to accept that things aren't symmetrical there either. Otherwise, why are you playing a World War II game? Again, that's one of those things that occasionally I think even the developers need to ask themselves, if we're doing a World War II game, why are we doing this? Because occasionally it feels like they didn't ask themselves that. And again, with heavy tanks, I mean, again, they need to feel big, splashy, and impactful. And again, I do think the morale could help achieve that, but that again, just 1 or 2 shot stuff, which is obviously not very fun. But at the same time, they do need to have an impact. They need to be able to hurt infantry and other armor, and they do need to be a threat. Otherwise, again, what's the point of getting them? Which is sort of the point, for example, we're seeing with the King Tiger at the moment, where it's just been sort of nerfed to the point where why we'd be getting it in the first place. So again, there are some things that I think that needs to be considered as well. Another option being just maybe considering more like, sort of, I wouldn't call them hero units, but certainly just more elite units with a bit more, splash ability and all that going on. Well, there's sort of a bit more, okay, you got one, but, it has a few more options compared to just your average Panzer crew. I mean, for example, Tiger crew was usually, taken from veterans, so there could be some options that will just further make them feel like they stand out a bit more compared to just your average tank crew. So that's sort of my thoughts on heavy tanks. Again, add side armor, but also, preferably work in a morale system, which the Tiger heavy tanks, they're just, sort of more champions in, except again that not all heavy tanks are made equal, and sort of try to balance and design the game around that rather than just trying to then force equality between them, because that's just silly. And, take it from there. So there you go. That's sort of the Propagandacast Addendum. Hope you like this video. Hope you agree with it. Hopefully it gave you some food for thought. How do you want to see heavy tanks done maybe in the future Companies, 3? Sign off in the comments. If you'd like to do consider donating or pledging on Patreon. This is Imperial Dane signing off, and see you all another time for another video. Cheers.